we go. Quick and dirty, setting up a Gaui 200 tail. First, I'm no finless by any stretch of the imagination. So if you're expecting that, you might as well stop it now. This is just to try to help some guys that are struggling with setting up their tail and are still dealing with binding. I'm using the stock tail with a 401 gyro. I used an Align battery tray. It's the aluminum one. My local hobby store didn't have the CF one in stock. I drilled a couple holes in the frame, used some of the tubing that comes in the hardware set with a Gaui and a Dremel to cut it to size for this battery tray. Attached it. It's super strong. It's not going to move, and it allows me to get to the 401 without having to dig out of the frame. Also, depending on what battery you're using, I can slide the battery forwards or backwards, you know, probably to within an 1/8 inch of the motor to get my CG perfect. I really like this setup. I think I'm going to mod my other two to do the same thing. Alright, setting up the tail. I've got my electronics in place. I need to zip tie them. I'm going to put some plastic weave on them just to dress it up a little bit. When I set up a tail, generally I'll make sure that the servo mounts are loose so I can adjust the servo back and forth. The tail, when you buy these almost ready to fly ARF kits, it's set. It should be good to go. You want to check the screws for Loctite, but there's not a whole lot of adjustment there. Check your belt to make sure the tension's right, not too tight, not too loose. It's kind of a fine line. I'm not sure there's a science to it other than just a feeling. So I'm going to make sure that this is loose so I can move it around. The first thing I want to check, I've got my servo arm in place. I've got the ball link on there, so I've knocked out a few of these steps. This is pretty self-explanatory in my opinion. So I'm going to move my servo, and an easy way to move it is just to move each one of these servo mounts a little bit, either depending on which direction I want to go, because they tend to bind on the tail boom. I've got my radio on. I'm using a DX7 and the AR6100. I believe it's channel 3 for the rudder on a 6100. I could be wrong, but depending on the equipment that you're using, your results may vary. So I want to fire up the 6100. Excuse me. What that's going to do is going to center my servos. So I'm just going to start it up. You can hear the little servos when they move in place. Then I'm going to check it. 490. That's not a perfect 90. It's pretty damn close enough for me. I don't think I could get it a whole lot closer than that. Again, this is quick and dirty, so don't send the hate mail. Next step is take your tail linkage. I'm using the CF tail linkage. I took the ends of the links into my local hobby store. I put it inside of each size of CF rod until I found the one that was just as close as I could get. C8 it, and it should be good to go. It won't flex on you if you're using CF. I don't know if it's lighter or not. I didn't weigh it. Anyway, it looks good, and Ray Stacy put it on Kyle's stuff, so hey, it's gotta mean something.
All right, once you have your tail linkage set up and it's running parallel to the boom, what you want to do is check the pitch on your tail rotor. So I'm going to set mine at 0, or at least what I perceive to be 0 by just looking at it. And how you do that is, if your servo is still loose, and it should be at this point, sliding, you can be very gently move the servo horn, and if you move it towards the tail, you can see the leading edge of the tail rotors move towards the right of the helicopter. Okay, and if you move it towards the front or the nose of the helicopter, the leading edge on the tail rotors go to the left of the helicopter. So let's just say this was how my tail rotors looked. I had the leading edge was facing to the left, or was pitched towards the left of the helicopter. I would want to move my tail servo out to take care of that. And what I do is I just move each one of these little servo mounts gently in the direction I want to go, because it tends to bind. What will happen is, as you slowly move it out, I'll do it with the servo horn here to save time, you're going to see your pitch change. So once you get it set where it goes, lock down these screws so that this doesn't move. Again, before you lock them down, check your linkage and make sure it's running parallel with the tail boom. I just initialized this thing so I know my servo's centered. Check the pitch on the blades. Mine is at 0. Again, some guys set them with 8 degrees, give or take. I'm setting mine at 0. I'm trying to do this quick and easy. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in the. I've got my transmitter on. I'm going to plug in the receiver. Let that initialize, and I'm going to check the movement on the tail rudder. If you're in heading hold mode, if you have to move it and your gyro moves the pitch, you can move the rudder back and forth and it'll center itself. Now I'm going to go full left rudder. What happens when you go left rudder is that it's going to push the tail to the right, so the nose goes to the left. I fly mine by the nose. Some guys fly them by the tail. Not a lot, some do. If you fly by the tail, it'd be the opposite. So when you go right, it's going to force your tail to the left, making the nose go to the right, if you're flying it by the nose. So that's straight. If it isn't right on yours, you can change it on your gyro, or you can change it on your transmitter. The next thing I want to check for is binding. If you look right down here, I don't know if you guys can see it, there is your pitch slider, the control arm, and there's an aluminum bracket that you attach your control arm to. That will bind on your linkage on the pitch slider when you give it right rudder. So what you want to check for is to make sure that your throw isn't so much that you're going to bind on this thing. You want to manually turn it, make sure you're not binding, or you can just eyeball it. I like to turn it. So what I'm going to do here is on the 401, again your gyro may vary, I'm going to adjust the limit, and I'm going to watch it as I do. I'm going to hold it full right rudder, and I'm going to adjust the limit, making sure that there's space between that aluminum bracket and the linkage on the pitch slider. Otherwise you will severely damage your helicopter and the resulting crash. That's about as close as I can get it right there without getting any binding. Also, you want to look at your linkage. Make sure that after you adjust so you're not binding on this arm or this bracket, that you give it left rudder and your linkage isn't binding. In other words, when you're full rudder in either direction, if you're using the metal or the wire linkage, it'll flex. If you go too much left rudder, you'll see it bow. So you gotta be a little careful when you use the CF. Right now mine's good. It's not binding in either direction, which means I'm almost good to go. The next thing that I've excuse me, got to make sure of is that my delay set and my gain is correct. Again, your gyro, depending on which one you're going to use, is going to be a little bit different. I've got a 401. I'll get it up in the air, set the gain, make sure I don't have any wag. Then I'll do some quick turns and see what kind of bounce back I'm getting, and I'll adjust the delay. That's the quick, easy, and dirty way to set up a tail on a Gaui 200.